Ahlo Sahla, Markham Rayan, and this is episode 4 of the Vegans for Palestine podcast. We dedicate this episode to a young Palestinian child named Hind Rajab. Hind was brutally murdered on the 29th of January 2024 by a military that frequently describes itself as the world's most moral vegan-friendly army. That's right, I am referring to the IOF, otherwise known as the Israeli Defense Forces. In this episode, Dalal and Waseem apply a critical vegan Palestinian lens upon this supposedly vegan-friendly army. Further, listeners are advised that the following episode contains crude and distressing descriptions of how the Israeli military, settlers, and society collectively torment and abuse both human and non-human animals across occupied Palestine.
One thing you may not know about him, he's vegan. This fact should not necessarily be so surprising, as in fact, the Israeli military is the most vegan army in the world, with 1 in every 18 soldiers, more than 5%, declaring themselves as vegan.
Right now, if you were to look up who has the most vegan army, Israel would come up as number 1. But first of all, vegan army is an oxymoron.
Yeah, that's how I would say it,
sense. Yeah. A vegan army is an oxymoron, and it doesn't make sense that you have soldiers fighting and killing people and calling themselves vegan, compassionate and ethical and moral and all of that. First of all, that specific Israeli army okay, in quotes, many of those that have refused that service used to be vegan, like they used to identify as vegan, but now we turned from that into the most vegan army, and I don't know how you go from refusing to commit war crimes to be the most vegan army.
Yeah. How did we actually get to the point where we see and hear about the most vegan army in the world, who are basically committing genocide against the human people in Palestine and the animals in Palestine, and that's all sentient beings in Palestine, but they are still vegan, wearing vegan cruelty-free boots and having all these vegan-friendly meals, and they claim themselves to be vegans. What the batikh is that? How is that even possible? What does that even mean when we hear all of these words across social media platforms and the news?
So it's important to remember that, like, first of all, being part of the animal rights movement and calling yourself vegan means that you stand for values that are against oppression and against exploitation of any living being, any sentient living being. So to be actively now fighting in a military occupational army and go around and kill people while still clinging on to veganism, something must have changed in you. Something must have changed your perception about veganism. And that was not you by default that changed that. It was pretty much propaganda that pushed you towards that. It was propaganda, and should I say state-sponsored propaganda, because the Israeli colony specifically saw an opportunity in that. And that really goes back to something that they call, many vegan Israelis call, the vegan revolution. And that happened about 15 years ago in 2010, 2011. That was the start of it. Because before that, we had some number of Israeli settlers refusing to commit war crimes and refusing to join the occupation forces, most of whom seem to be vegan, according to some data that came out in an article that I read. The article, interestingly, is called "There Are No Chickens in Suicide Vests," which is a very interesting topic to read about and to understand the perception of vegan Israelis. And now, after 2010, 2011, all of a sudden, we have the start of going towards having the most vegan army. And again, like I said, that's part of a state-sponsored propaganda, because it allowed their colony and their government to use veganism, use animal rights as part of their Israeli national identity, so that everybody can unite, whether you're a right wing, you're a left wing, you're compassionate, you're anti-occupation, all of that. No, let's just all unite for the animals and only for the animals. Nobody else matters. And as long as you're helping with that, then you're doing good. And there's many references throughout the years with that, including some major and large vegan figures in the Israeli animal rights movement. One of them is called Ori Shavit. She's quoted in an article saying things like, well, we feel like we can't help with the political situation, so we just tend to see the advocating for animals as something good that we do. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but that's just what that quote really says. So yeah, it's all state sponsored, it's all pushed down, it's all propaganda that the government wanted to use. And it's not just, we have to go back to why is it, like, why did they want to use vegan washing as a tool? Because it's not unique to use a type of washing, a type of it's not unique to use the type of washing, because it's also included in like greenwashing with the environment, saying that they have the most sustainable technology that helps with the environment. They have art washing, they have pink washing, all of that using specific, let's say, progressive movements in the West, so that the West can relate to Israel as part of them as well, so that those people can stop criticizing Israel. Because we have to go back, and this is interesting, Dalal, because we're going to be jumping back and forth between a big timeline, and I think that's okay for the listeners, because it's really a roller coaster for people to understand. This whole thing comes down to, I want to take you all back to like 2005, 2004, 2005, even early 2000s, and we know that during that period there was the Palestinian Intifada, the second Intifada, where there was an uprising against the occupation, and there was a lot of violence, and there was a lot of aggression from the Israeli side. And you believe it or not, it got to a point where the Israeli occupation was receiving criticism globally. Even, I'm not even kidding here, but even the president of the United States at the time, Bush, had condemned Israel for taking out a Hamas leader in his house, killing his family and his children, and saying that that's not okay. So, and then taken into contrast now, what we're seeing in Gaza, that's just the normal now, right? Like, that's what people are okay with now. So a lot has changed between now and then. And the reason for that is, as I said, going back to 2004, 2005, is there was a government-backed campaign that basically the Israeli government wanted to find ways to stop people from criticizing Israel. And this didn't just happen out of the blue. There's multiple events that came into play for that. Not just the fact that they were going through the Intifada, but also during 2003, 2004, the International Court of Justice actually came out with a report that said that we do find that the apartheid wall that the Israeli occupation is upholding in the occupied West Bank is illegal, and their apartheid regime is not, it's not okay, and it's against international law. So with that came a lot of criticism, but also at that time, if some of you may remember, that the BDS movement, the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions movement, came into play just about a year after that ruling came out. And that started to get traction around the world, and it started to affect the economy of Israel at the time, because nobody wanted to be involved with a settler colony that's against international law. We have an obligation to do that. Whether or not we benefit from it, we have an obligation to do that. So the companies worldwide, governments worldwide, knew that they would be coming under pressure. And Israel knew that they needed to counteract that. So they came out with Brand Israel, and that government-backed campaign included various types of washing, like I said, from art washing, pink washing, green washing, and now vegan washing. And
because you can wash everything, basically.
Everything, like, you could just, you have blood on your hands, just wash it away with things that people can relate to and think that you're doing good for the world.
This is all strategic. It's a way for Israel to promote itself as a state that is liberal, that is progressive, and distract the attention basically from the ongoing violations of human rights, of animal rights, of Palestinian rights, basically. And it's way easy in Israel to fight for anything except for Palestinians.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's all part of the propaganda. It's all part of the of what this institute is, what this state is basically built on.
For sure. And just to, you're saying that, like, they're trying to like present themselves as liberal and progressive. There's actually a quote going back to the idea of them using veganism. There's a quote by the founder of an organization called Vibe Israel, which brings, has tours to bring people from around the world, specifically the US, Canada, and the UK. Not necessarily for like settlements or things like that. So these are like non-Jewish people. They're just like people that might be criticizing Israel, and they bring them on tours to show them the progressive side, the liberal side. So with veganism, there's a quote by this founder that I'm going to read it here. I have it in front of me. She says, "The online vegan community is huge and mostly draws people with liberal viewpoints, with a stronghold among women and millennials. These three audiences tend to view Israel more critically than others, and we felt it would be a good topic through which to raise awareness for Israel. We believe that engaging this generation with Israel through what they care about is the best way to enhance Israel's global reputation." That's again about the online vegan community. And this person that I just mentioned, her name is Joanna Landau. I don't care if I'm pronouncing her name right or not, but anyway, she is actually on the board of Brand Israel, and she also has ties to she also has ties to a publication whose president used to be the president of APAC, the lobby group in the US. So again, there's so many ties between so many people that strategically, as you said, Dalal, that strategically wanted to push for this. And push for people to start viewing Israel as more "quote unquote" liberal and progressive, and veganism. They saw veganism as part of that, and unfortunately, it worked. You see a lot of major news outlets, major vegan organizations, touting Israel as the vegan capital of the world, as the vegan, as the place of like where veganism is great, and people to go on tours in, and people to to have vegan tourism in. So it's all strategic and it's all for a purpose. I want to bring attention to people that it's not just these vegan washing is not just to deter people from the animal rights movement and from the vegan community from criticizing the settler colony, but it's also a way to push for their developments in the industry, in the food tech, in lab grown meat, and all of that, so that they can uphold that economy that is oppressive and that oppresses Palestinians. Much of which we see many examples that these same companies that even the settler colony, their government themselves, keep pushing and advertising as the first innovative lab grown meat. Many of them have been donating to the army, and many of them even exist on stolen land. So all of that is not just to deter people from criticizing the settler colony, but it's also to benefit from the animal rights movement in order to uphold oppression, which goes against our values as vegans, right? So it's interesting.
When I was looking at the topic of vegan washing, it really took me across many articles online that's a topic for a different time to talk about, but this is very interesting that we have something called white veganism. I know that there's really enough literature yet on what is white veganism, but in short, it's everything that is written by white people who claim that they have they are sitting what is veganism and how people in different countries across different cultures would be adopting this philosophy in their lives. And but again, when we're talking about vegan washing, it's very important that people it's not just a matter of the food you eat or the things you drink or the kind of clothes you wear. There is a lot of intersectionality with politics, with human rights, with animal rights, and with the very ethics and morality of what it takes to be vegan. And we're seeing online a lot of vegan people actually are not they're still subscribing to vegan products and to vegan corporations and promoting them, and at the same time they claim to be standing up for human rights, let alone rights. And it doesn't make sense when are not people actually realizing that there is a lot of connections. There are many connections basically between the two things, between standing up for abuse and manipulation of animals, and at the same time the abuse and manipulation and oppression of humans. Why are we failing to see that as vegans? Why there aren't many educated vegans out there who can simply unsubscribe from the vegan washing that is happening? And at the same time, we are actually pushing forward for the political agenda of occupation, and how the Israeli government and other governments are all complicit in this genocide. But there is a lot to unpack here, but maybe why are we failing to see that as vegans?
That's an excellent question. And I would answer it by saying that, as you mentioned, with white veganism, or the colonizers' version of veganism, let's say, like I said earlier, it's changing the perception of the movement. It's changing what it means to be a vegan. And right now, it seems to be that what it means to be a vegan is your convenience at reducing animal harm, not the actual reduction of animal harm. So that means that you have, as long as you have products and ways of living the same way that you lived before, but without causing harm to animals, then you're doing good. And that is very problematic because, it's problematic for many ways, but one of them is, of course, as we mentioned, it's directly tied to the oppression and to the exploitation of people. And again, this is not just about Palestine. I mean, Palestine is the focus in what we're discussing, but like I said, there are many companies, whether they're vegan or not, that they exploit, they exploit people, that there's child exploitation, yet they produce vegan products, and those products are commonly used. And like I said, that's one thing that you're causing harm. But the other side that I don't think people often think about is it's actually very harmful to the animal rights movement itself, because it's giving a very wrong, false idea about what veganism is to the rest of the world. So non-vegans look at vegans and say, this is your movement. Your movement is to exploit other living beings in order to protect the animals. And don't get me wrong, we do need to protect the animals, and we are not their saviors, but we're trying to explain to people that your use of animals as, some type of product is not right. But at the same time, using other living beings is not right to do that. And that's really the essence of veganism, isn't it? Like, to stop seeing humans and animals as one being more superior than the other, or one being above the other. So why are you choosing that? And that is actually causing a lot of harm to the vegan movement. As you know, we share a lot of things on Vegans for Palestine. I share a lot of things on my personal page about that. And nearly every time, there's a post on vegan washing, and specifically calling out Israeli companies, or even companies that are associated with Israel, every time there's a vegan that comes in and they're like, well, if you do this, then you're going to be killing animals. If you do this, then you're harming the animals. And it's like, are you ignoring the other part? Why can't we do both? Why can't we protect both? Why can't we refuse that? And again, to remind you all, because to him or them, those people that are coming in, there's actually one specific person that comes to mind that has not ceased to stop coming to my comments and leave these such comments. But in general, these people that come into comments and with arrogant responses like that, it's not just dehumanizing to Palestinians, but again, it proves the point of convenience. You're doing it because you think that Israel's existence as a vegan capital and their development and all of that is good because it's helping you not cause harm to animals. But it's not actually not causing harm to animals, because we're seeing, the ways Israel and their army is carrying out genocide, not just against the people, but they're also harming animals, whether it's in Gaza or in the West Bank. Settlers just go around and, like, sorry for this, but like, they chop off donkeys' heads and put them on places just to threaten people. And
they do that to pigs as well.
Exactly. And their claim is that if we don't do it, they're going to do it. So like, we're just sending a message. Or, also there's threats. There's also, it's just sadistic in a way that I can't describe, because this topic can go on and on and on about how Israel keeps claiming that they are morally superior for having the most vegan nation. You know, they claim to have 5%, 7%, whatever the percentage is. And they claim that the majority of the nation is susceptible of veganism and of caring about the animals. Yet they go around and call Palestinians animals to justify their oppression, their genocide. So how does
Is
that work?
really
How
vegan friendly to call.
Yeah, and that organization, Vegan Friendly, that is now, spreading all around the world, specifically in the West, the UK, US. I'm seeing them here in so-called Canada. They're there to, again, put the footprint and say Israel is doing the best work in veganism, and we have the proof to show it. Um, but it's not vegan friendly, as I'm gonna quote you here, as we discussed earlier. It's genocide friendly.
Genocide. Yeah.
It's just to make genocide more friendly, and genocide. The genocide of Palestinians didn't just start from October 7th. It's escalating since then, but it's always been there, and it's just wild to me that people buy into that. And I know that many people may have not known about this. Many vegans may have actually bought into the propaganda, because I have to admit, Israel does a really good job at portraying themselves as vegan friendly, or at least they used to. But then as soon as they started advertising themselves as having the most vegan army with 10,000 soldiers that are vegan and all of that, it doesn't make sense to me. How are vegans in the West looking at that and saying, yes, more vegan armies or more armies should be doing that? Like, we have major animal rights organizations specifically saying more countries need to learn from Israel's military in regards to veganism. Do they? Do they really? Because it's not really good for veganism.
Sorry, I just wanted to say that nobody is learning the lesson that armies, quote unquote, whose mission is to kill and ethnically cleanse, and that is the least human we can ever see in life.
Absolutely. And it's wild to me because on that point, we keep going back and forth between timelines. But, as I said, the so-called vegan revolution started in the early 2010. And as soon as it started getting major traction worldwide, that's actually due to the media, and the media, the global media. Around 2015, just after the Israeli army, and for the listeners, just please know that you're not seeing us, and whether or not I'm actually doing the quotes, assume that I'm always using the quotes, because they're not army, they're not Israel, they're all just a settler colony. But the point is, after 2014, when Israel's army began advertising itself as friendly for those that are vegan soldiers and accommodating and providing them the vegan leather boots, providing them with extra stipends to go and buy vegan meals and all of that. So after 2014, when Israel started advertising themselves as vegan friendly and they care about the soldiers that are vegans and their values and all of that, and giving them fall leather boots and giving them stipends to go and buy vegan meals, and if you want to refuse vaccines that are tested on animals, you have the right to do that, and all of that, just trying to show that they understand and they care for the values of those so-called vegan soldiers. Right after that, the media started advertising it too. And there's an interview by the BBC that interviewed a soldier in 2015. And basically, I found it very interesting, because basically the interviewer was asking the soldier, don't you find it hypocritical to, be vegan and carry a weapon and like be harming people and so on? And her response was like, no, I am actually trying to do both. I care for the animals, so I'm protecting the animals and the people. We're just defending ourselves. And we hear that all the time. It's a IDF, Israeli Defense Forces, but it's not. It's an occupation forces. But they keep implementing these things. And what I found even more interesting than that interaction that happened is that the interviewer then, in the post-production of this interview, was like, she politely disagreed. The way he used politely was the most crazy thing I've ever heard, because you clearly see the the hypocrisy of that, and then you add politely by saying that, like, oh, like, she's a young 18-year-old, and they say it's an 18-year-old or 19-year-old, and like, you know, she seems polite and like she's caring for the animals and she's vegan and all of that, and she has a weapon on her shoulder just hanging. But
she's an 18-year-old. And the
yeah,
world is so twisted that when they think of Palestinians, oh, these are men and these are women. They don't say these are teenagers or these are kids in imprisonment or in Israeli jail and going through the horrors of torture there.
absolutely. It's crazy. The way that the dehumanization of Palestinians happens, it goes hand in hand with the way that they try to show the other side, the Israeli side, as more humane. And it's not even just like 18-year-old and 17-year-old Palestinians that are being called men. I remember Hind Rajab, Allah, يرحمها, when she was martyred by 300 plus bullets, the media called her a 5-year-old woman. A
Exactly.
5-year-old woman. But you have an 18-year-old kid with a soldier on her shoulder politely disagreeing with the fact that she's defending animals and people.
We also are just learning at this hour that banners have been hung from the hall. They read Hind's Hall and Intifada. Hind is a reference to a woman who was killed in Gaza.
The audio on January 29th of 6-year-old Palestinian girl Hind called, as she was calling the paramedics, begging them to come rescue her after the rest of her family in the car had already been killed by the Israeli military. She kept begging, come get me. Please come get me. I'm so scared, please come. No one was able to reach the car for 12 days.
She sat in a car filled with deceased family members. 5 years old, sat in a car with deceased family members, and she called for help. She had the wherewithal, the courage, the temerity to call for aid.
Hind Rajab was 6 years old when Israelis killed her. Hind Rajab was 6 years old. Lincoln, you will be remembered as the butcher of Gaza. You will be remembered for murdering innocent Palestinians.
And not only is she dead, right? But the two people that went to answer her call for aid are no longer with us as well.
A UK-based research group found that whoever killed Hind and her cousin Lan and her entire family likely was able to see inside the vehicle when they shot. There were 355 bullets that they saw from the photos that were taken, and from the forensic investigation, they found that it had to have come from a weapon that could shoot between 750 and like 900 rounds per minute.
And Madam Speaker, I'm here to talk about it because a new forensic analysis found that the Israeli military fired not one, not two, not a dozen, not 20, 355 tank bullets at the car that Hind was in. And the tank was so close that the Israeli soldiers would have had a clear view of Hind in the car. 6 months later, the State Department and President Biden has yet to hold the Israeli government accountable for these executions.
Hind is a reference to a woman who was killed in Gaza.
She was a child, not a woman. Shame, CNN. She was a 6-year-old child. Yeah? Check your wording. Please, everyone, if you're choosing to watch news networks like this, please, critical think, listen to the way that they are phrasing things, the way that they are giving you information. This was not a woman, this was a 6-year-old child, and they do this all the time with every story. Not only the stories about Palestine, but every story that they are feeding you is curated. Please, eyes open, ears open, listen. She was a child, a 6-year-old child. Shame. Shame, CNN.
The double standards of media have really created this image that Palestinians are the ones everybody should be protecting themselves from, or Israel has the right to defend itself because, these people started it when Palestinians were ethnically cleansed since 1948 till today. And but there is no mention of this narrative out there in the media because they wouldn't want to learn about that side of the story.
Absolutely. And why do they not want to know about that? Because again, Israel plays a very good job at trying to show that they are more progressive and liberal to those that are in the West to deter them from criticizing them. And again, like I said, it's not just that, but it's also to push those that are in the West to not just see them as liberal and progressive, but also to invest in what they're doing as part of something good for humanity and for the world in general. Where our topic here is about veganism, though you can see that in other ways when it comes to like sustainability within the food tech and all of that. And tying it back to veganism, I want to go back to the Vibe Israel tour that they did. This happened around 2018. Again, Vibe Israel started way before then, but the vegan tour specifically happened in 2018. And just a couple of years after that, saw the Israeli government and the Israeli companies saw a major increase in investments in food tech, and specifically the alt protein. If I'm not mistaken, there's the investments went like, there's an article that I read that said it went eightfold. It went from, what is it, 14 million to 114 million in a couple of years. And again, that's not just random. It's not just because of Vibe Israel, but it's also because the head of the government, the lovely Bibi Milikowski, aka Netanyahu, also took a chance to advertise these on television and so on. Trying a company called Aleph Farms, which is a food tech alt protein company, and he advertised it as it felt guilt-free and it tastes just like meat. So like, yeah, we need to push for more of this. But guess who he had next to him as he was doing this? One of the top vegan animal rights activists. She's known as the Angry Vegan. And her name as Angry Vegan is because she keeps she changed the way that people in Israel view veganism by being, so compassionate about it. And again, we should be compassionate and very, actively pushing for that. But she's also a former IOF soldier, and she, in 2019, was appointed to become the animal rights advisor for Netanyahu. And she accepted it. And she even touts Netanyahu as the only one that does good for the animals. And she got even under criticism by certain Israeli settlers for like joining the right-wing Likud party. And her response was like, well, to care about the animals, you don't have to be right-wing or left-wing. And this goes back to what we're saying. Like, you don't, it doesn't matter. As long as you're there for the animals, it's okay. But you kill people.
There is a lot of just contradiction here. We talked about the vegan superiority, and then the vegan capitalism, and you have the vegan revolution, and also we still need to talk about the vegan nationalism there. But this big square of contradiction, of opposition, it doesn't make a lot of sense, really. It's well, definitely there is some sense. I try to understand where things come from, but it doesn't really add up when we talk about people wanting to protect the animals, then be the person who is working to protect the animals. But people fail to see the bigger picture, that all sentient beings are connected. We can't just pick and choose, oh, this is a Palestinian dog, oh, let's rescue this dog and take it from these horrible people and put it into a sanctuary, and then like post about it on social media because we're the cool ones. And I've seen this across the Israeli like social media. They're promoting Palestinian animals being rescued from Gaza as, oh, the poor creatures that have been, through the horrors of the war. But who really is causing the war here? I don't know. I don't see how this is human, how this is humane of people to. But that's fine. That's fine. Rescue animals, but just don't really cause the very killing and the very suffering of animals, of all sentient beings.
But just to add on to your point is that like some of the people that I'm seeing that have supposedly rescued the animals from Gaza because they're under war, they got criticism on social media by like saying like, but like you killed the family that you took the dog from. And that person's response, the one that rescued, is like, well, you should see how they treat animals in Gaza. And it's like, that's another level of dehumanization, because it's saying, again, going back to the moral superiority, you think that you are more morally superior because you rescue a dog and you're vegan and you abstain from eating animals. Try living in Gaza under constant bombardment and protecting all of your pets, taking them with you, being displaced, walking on foot, carrying them with you, putting them on your head, and actually caring for the animals, not leaving them behind because you're facing like 2 minutes of warning before they bomb the building. And it's just, and not even like a warning. It's insane to even think about it as a warning, but you know what I mean. Like just the fact that they see themselves as morally superior because they care more about animals, or they think that they care more about animals, is just not okay. And you know, going back to just the right wing, left wing thing, like yes, in general, you know, it doesn't matter what your beliefs are in, as long as you know you're helping the animals, you're helping the animals, okay. But then there's the bigger context, as you mentioned, is like, well, if you're helping the animals, don't do it because you want to be seen as the rescuer of the animals, as the vegan capital of the world. Do it for the animals. But those specifically, I'm speaking about the top vegan figures in the settler colony, but also the companies that use the animal rights movement to claim themselves as very vegan friendly. They're using that specifically to draw investments, to draw interest in the oppressive regime. And it's not, you know, you could say that they are still caring about the animals and they're still protecting them, okay, but you're only protecting a certain part of animals, and only a certain, you know, on one side of the equation. You're only protecting them while they're with you, but you're not protecting them when you're bombing them. You're, you know, so it's just wild to me to think that there are people out there that, you know, still see Israel as this vegan capital of the world. And it didn't just become the vegan capital of the world all of a sudden, because again, to claim that you are the vegan capital and that you have the most vegan army and you are morally superior, your mindset about veganism had to change. You had to have been programmed differently to stop viewing all sentient beings as equal and deserving of liberation, and then only the animals. And many people will say that, like, well, veganism is only about the animals, and it's like, okay, yes, by default, it's like, yes, you try to like abstain from any exploitation from the animals as much as possible, and even like no use of animals. And absolutely, I agree with that. But you're directly causing great harm to the environment. You're even preventing birds from flying, doing their regular migration in Gaza. You're even, I don't know what to tell you, but I came across like an article, I think it's by, it was an interview for Vegan in Palestine, where at the time, a few years ago, they were talking about how there's this specific vet that is in one of the cities that has a lot of checkpoints to get to, and they would find an animal that needs to be rescued, they're injured, they need to be treated. They would take them, they would go on the checkpoint. By the time they got the chance to cross that checkpoint, the animal's dead. And it's like your existence as a settler colony, as an apartheid state, specifically causes harm to the animals as well as humans. And yet you portray yourself as morally superior and all of that. And it's just completely false. And again, the whole programming thing goes back to not just the fact that there's this part of like the convenience where they have the most vegan products and they're more developed and all of that, but it's also part of making them as their national identity, as their, you know, as Israelis, we should be more vegan. And this is pushed in a way to make people, again, not just deter them from criticizing Israel, but also to push for investments in those companies that uphold the oppression.
One year ago today, little Hind Rajab was taken away. The 29th of January should be called Hind Rajab Day. Hind Rajab a 5-year-old girl from Gaza, travelling with her uncle and aunt and cousins in a car. They came under fire. Scared and afraid, her cousin received a call from the Red Crescent for aid. We heard shots. Then a little girl, Hind, was on the phone. The others dead. She was alone. We heard the little girl ask, "Come take me." She was trapped and unable to flee. 12 days later, her body was found. The smell of death all around. The ambulance sent to rescue the child never arrived. The paramedics also died. Ahmed Al-Madoun and Yusuf Zaino, the name of 2 paramedical heroes, killed while trying to save dear Hind. They met with a terrible end. Their ambulance hit by a US-made anti-tank bomb. Everybody knows attacking an ambulance is wrong. Killing kids and healthcare workers are war crimes. And this kind of murder was happening all the time. Can somebody explain why unarmed people were attacked? And yet the Western countries still continued to have their back. The war crimes that the whole world was able to see. Crimes committed by the Israeli army. The ICJ had asked to stop genocidal acts, but then a family in a car was attacked. Bullets shot into the car, 335. None of the occupants survived. The ambulance sent with 2 paramedics was bombed and they were killed. Israel doesn't respect international rules. Hind, we will never forget nor forgive what the IDF did. So many children have died. So many parents have not survived. The world has witnessed a genocide.
Like I said earlier on, it's not just harmful, and absolutely it is, and that is one of the biggest impact is that like it's being used to continue exploitation and harm to people, but it's also very harmful for the vegan movement itself, because if this cycle keeps going on where you have a vegan revolution where it just becomes part of your national identity, where that's the core focus and the only focus is just to care about the animals and nothing else without actually taking into consideration anything else, and then you go on to be advertising yourself as like, well, I have more morality and more ethics than everybody else because I care about the animals, and then you start saying that like, well, our country has more products that are vegan that make our life easier, then that cycle keeps going around in a way that non-vegans will never be vegan, because they're only going to see veganism as a tool to exploit others, and it's just not okay. And again, I want to emphasize this however many times I can. You should not be harming animals. Should not. But you should not also use that as a way to harm others. And that's what Israel does.
This is very interesting that this all comes down to veganism being a moral shield. When, on the contrary, veganism should be your moral compass. That is, in its very core, the way you should be viewing the world around you, with compassion, with humanity, with justice. And this is what the examples we see on social media, at least to say on social media. But really what we see is people saying, oh, I'm vegan. They put those tiny emojis or stickers on their profiles with these catchy words of vegan, or fighting for this, fighting for that, angry for this. I'm happy for people to be angry, but be angry for the right cause, the right way. And we're not judging people here, but what we're hoping to do is really bring that light into the movement, and we're trying to help people be educated more. And it's absolutely, it doesn't make sense that we view veganism from one tiny lens only that is only fighting and advocating for animals, which is absolutely correct. You're fighting for animals. You're fighting for their justice, for their, just trying to keep animals living in amongst us all in safety, without exploitation, without any oppression. But at the same time, we're failing to see how this very oppression we're really just projecting on humans, because someone is better than the other, because people are blinded. And how can we help people as vegans from vegan to another? How are we hoping to see things changing, and for people to be more aware and more educated, and also being advocates themselves for veganism, for animals, for humans, for all sentient beings, but doing the right things, and being morally compassionate and ethically about the way they're leading this movement?
I would have to start by saying that when we are seeing veganism being used as a tool, we need to first clarify that and provide the proper image of it. And what I mean by that is make yourself as vegans for Palestine, as vegans who refuse to accept this type of exploitation of the movement, make yourself as visibly aware as possible to tell others that are non-vegan, before we actually go back to veganism, tell others that are non-vegan, this is not veganism. This is not what we believe in. This is not what it stands for. And we refuse to accept it. And we refuse to accept any, not just Israel, but any company, any entity, anybody that is using that as a tool, whether it's to deter them from criticizing their actions or to show the convenience and their developments. So when you make that clear, you're showing the actual side of what veganism means, and that you exist and you're there to actually reduce that harm.
The very fact that veganism for me has been the journey to be somebody who's challenged and critically thinking and looking into matters and causes and issues, not just about my country, Palestine, but also about other communities, about other people in different communities in different countries. It's the way for me, and I'm sure you can relate as well, it's the way for us to see the world in a more just and humane way. And if being and that is my favorite quote, if choosing veganism doesn't cultivate our morality, and that for that to help us stand against all sorts and forms of oppression against all sentience, I don't really know what would.
Absolutely, well said. And I want to mention that, like, with regards to Vegans for Palestine, when we first became a thing, and it still is in our bio, it's uniting vegans for a free Palestine. And the key word here is uniting vegans, of course, for a free Palestine, but uniting vegans is an important thing. I'm not saying that all vegans are the same. I'm not saying that all vegans will have one specific goals and they will agree on everything, but being united in what veganism actually means is one of the important steps of bringing about an actual just cause. One of the just causes that we believe in is a free Palestine. And that's what we hope for. And I hope that the listeners will find important information that can help them not just combat Israeli vegan washing, but also unite with other vegans to build a better movement, to build a more just movement. And we're not the only ones. There's many, many other organizations and groups that are doing great work on that for Palestine and for uniting vegans for its true values. So connect with them, connect with everybody, and learn from each other. And again, be in the educating part, not the provoking part, because that's what will help others that are outside of the movement to feel related to the movement. And we're not like Brand Israel. We're not making them feel related to us for a purpose other than the just cause.
And we're here to keep the fight going and for a liberated, free Palestine. From the
Absolutely.
river to the sea, Palestine will
From
be
the
free.
river to the sea, Palestine will be free.
Thank you very much, Waseem. Thank you.
Thank you, Dalal. I appreciate that.